Mack, CEO of Agromovil. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm super excited for this. We don't have a lot of people on the show that are very experienced in the development finance world as well as in the startup world. So I think marrying the two is certainly creates an interesting area of expertise, and so I'm super excited for this episode.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. I mean, so do you want to, start this off just kind of telling the story of how you transition from the whole world of, development finance, PPP into startups? Because most people, they like their cushy job at the World Bank or, whatever it may be, and they don't want to enter this high risk world of startups, but you decided that there was a bigger purpose for your career. So
well, everybody starts out on a slightly different road. And
yes.
When I started off my career in Africa, there wasn't really a startup world to be called anything at that point. Not really in the United States, and certainly not in emerging markets. I started off working with the bank in 95 or 96, a while ago, and did some of the bank's first work on public-private partnerships, because I saw even then that there was that if Africa was going to grow and if the developing markets were going to grow, then that meant that there was going to be a role for the private sector, and that there was a multiplier effect that could happen if you had the combination of development finance and corporates, and if people could get looped into not just the aid stream but the economic stream, because really that's the best aid program you could possibly have.
Right.
And spent 5 years working at the World Bank, did a lot of work on conflict, private sector and post-conflict, and private sector development more broadly. I loved it. Had a very, very good experience, but it's a big organization and there's a big world out there, and basically left the bank to move to the other side of the fence, if you will, working with corporates that wanted to understand how they could play a role to do smart things that made sense for their business, but also were going to work for the development of the countries in which we are operating. Ostensibly, what's good for Nigerian business is also good for Nigeria's development if you orient the two in the right way from the start.
Right. And did you make that transition because you saw that corporates were starting to get more interested in Africa, or was it just a natural point in your career that you wanted to make that transition?
I think a little bit of each. I think even still today, there are an awful lot of companies that talk a good game, but when it comes down to it, work in emerging markets is still a very small part of the work that they do, just in terms of revenue, in terms of the staff that they devote to it, in a lot of ways. They still see a lot of emerging markets as secondary consumers, because they haven't really gotten around to the idea that these are consumers who can put money in their pocket. And also, a lot of the markets aren't very good at selling themselves still. And so you got this kind of it's a chicken and egg situation where Africa and Middle East or Latin America may be a small part of our annual revenues, and so we devote a small amount of our annual marketing budget, and so it kind of creates that kind of low energy. Right. But I think it's starting to change a lot. It's starting to change a lot in part because there are more connections between business that's growing on in the emerging markets world, and also some of the economic dynamism. To be a company in a lot of countries in Africa means to have a startup mentality. You got to be a real hustler. You got to be really smart. You got to be really, really creative. You got to never take no for an answer. And so this is an obvious place for a company like ours to be.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. And do you see that corporate interest in these markets is ramping up along with what China's doing? Like, do you think China ramping up their investment? Because China now invests about 10 times more in Africa than the US does right now. And do you think that's creating a sense of urgency for corporates, or kind of giving them a new perspective on the markets? Or
I think it's possible. I mean, I think we're a little far away from the startup world right now, but the geopolitics of it are a little bit complicated, because the kinds of investments that are being made are, they're mostly in natural resources and infrastructure and things like that, which may or may not have much impact either on employment or on that kind of a startup or an incubator mentality. My impression is that this is still very much the game of Latin America and Africa to decide for themselves. And so, our goal has been to try to work in these markets, which we know really, really well, and get, make the kind of right kind of partnerships and tap into what we believe is the natural dynamism of these regions and solve some big problems and get paid for them.
Yeah, and the problem you're solving with Agromovil is certainly a big one. How is, but I'm sure you saw a lot of big problems when you were, in the development finance world. So why did you decide to focus on this one in particular? And maybe you should kind of give us a high level what exactly the problem the supply chain is.
So the big problem is I spent a lot of time, decades working in the emerging markets world, and I had a period of about 4 or 5 years where I was traveling every month to Africa or Latin America, occasionally to Asia, for work, and kept seeing the same thing. I kept seeing an image of people, small farmers, sitting by the side of the road with a big bag of something, right? They'd been working, their eyes out to try to grow some crop, and it's sitting there by the side of the road in the hot sun, going bad. The economic future of their family literally going bad before their eyes. And I came back to the office and I said, we've got to take a look at this and see if this is a real thing, because at this point, there's just no explaining why it would make sense that these guys can't get their stuff to market. So did the research, got a team working on it, and in turn, in fact, it was exactly what we expected. I mean, according to WHO, somewhere between 150 and 200 billion dollars worth of goods never even make it to market, right? A lot of the stuff that makes it to market is damaged in the process, or it gets there late, so there's a freshness premium. So there's a huge amount of waste on the one side. It's also, it's not efficient for the transporters to come and pick the things up, and it's very, very expensive, in part because so many intermediaries are touching it. For the people who are selling it to end consumers, who are paying 10, 15, 20 times what the farmer is getting. So it's an inefficient system all the way around. But what could we do to fix that? Now, I have a personal connection to it, because not only have I worked in these markets for 30 plus years, I got 2 young sons who I hope will have a chance to eat later on. We have friends all around the world. We know what it's like to try to make a living in these places. We know that there needs to be that that agriculture, small scale agriculture, is the largest employer on earth. There are 500 million small farms around the world. 1.5 billion people live in these small farm communities. That would be the largest country on earth, right? So even if we had enough food, making agriculture work as an economic activity is crucial if we're all going to make it together as the world becomes a 9 billion person, not a 7 billion person planet, right? So this seemed to be the right thing. We back in the office 3 or 4 years ago, made up a list of the most important problems that we're facing the world right now. And we looked at employment, and we looked at food, and we looked at climate, and this touches a lot of the things that just need to happen. So we figured, been very lucky to have all these opportunities to this point in my career. I wanted to really orient around solving something that was big, and I'm foolish enough to think we can get it accomplished.
Yeah. Well, I guess paint us a picture of exactly what this looks like. So these farmers, once their crops actually yield, do they just kind of pull a tractor just on the side of the road, pull it to the market and try to sell it? Or like, how does the process work?
It obviously depends from country to country.
Right.
And there are small farmers who live in really basic conditions, all the way up through farmers who are very tightly connected into the global supply chain. But one of the first little one-pagers that we put together has a picture of an African farmer with 3 or 4 bunches of bananas, pushing them on his bicycle. Mm-hmm. Most farmers around the world have 2 responsibilities. One is to grow, and the other one is to transport. They're inefficient transporters, right? And we've spent a tremendous amount of time trying to fix the question of, can we make them better agriculturalists, ag extension, and all kinds of ag data, and climate data and things like that. But we really haven't tackled the question of how to get the product to market very effectively. And so that's one of the biggest issues that we face. Think about it like this. I'm a small farmer out, and it's especially true if you're a farmer in a post-conflict area, or if you're a farmer in an economically disadvantaged or indigenous area. I'm a small farmer out in the hinterlands. How am I going to tell the market that my goods are ready? right? One of the things that that Agromovil is a match, batch, and pay functionality. It's a functionality that allows the farmer, the producer, and the buyer to match up, and pushes those matches to a batching engine that allows for optimized routes, so that a transporter can come and pick them up in an optimized way, so that they can make an economically viable visit to the countryside, and then allows people to pay on the platform, because a lot of people around the world still pay with cash, and that is risky, and that is inefficient, and that leaves people out of the financial system and doesn't allow them to build their credit ratings and all the different kinds of things that can happen if they're in the system. And so, if you will, the first part of that is to be able to raise your hand and say, hi, I'm here. I have this quantity of goods that's going to be available at this point in time, of this quality. Who can come and pick me up? Just the visibility between the buyer and the seller and the transporter is a huge change in what goes on. Right now, either I have somebody who comes by and picks up my stuff, buys it whatever price they want, or I have one of my local friends come and help me get things to market. And both of those are pretty inefficient from the farmer perspective and from the consumer perspective too.
Right. And so how do you go about user acquisition in these markets? Because I know a lot of startups here, they'll just, the answer to that is we'll raise some venture capital and just pump some money into Facebook ads.
Yeah.
But that's probably not the best way to actually get these farmers and these transporters onboarded onto the platform, right?
Sure. No, I mean, this is not the way that Uber has, massive advertising is not going to be the way to reach global agriculture.
Although they just laid off a huge portion of their marketing. I think their latest report was like a $5 billion loss this last quarter.
Okay, so that's not on anyways. Our goal is not to create a large company with $5 billion losses.
Yes, African startups can't afford to lose $5 billion a quarter.
So the short answer is that our is the only way to really reach the agricultural communities, from what we've been able to see, is to work through the trusted groups that they belong to and they relate to. Mm-hmm. Okay, so who are our partners? We're, as I may have mentioned, we're starting our initial launch is going to be in Colombia, but we're already talking with Ericos Yacuan and Farmerline in Ghana and a number of other places all along the continent. And our the general idea is very simple. You don't want to try to reach farmers one by one, okay? It wouldn't make any sense. You want to reach them through their growers cooperatives. You want to reach them through the transport unions that they use. You want to reach them through the banks that they use and the credit unions and other financial intermediaries, and even through the cell phone companies that they're using. So work with those as aggregators, work with those people as trusted intermediaries, as people where obviously your training has to be simple. The interface has to be simple. It can't be a complicated thing. It has to all be cell phone enabled, which all of our stuff is. But you want to work through people that they already know, because the goal is not culture change. The goal is efficiency and happy customers who get it and making more money. I can tell you from interviewing farmers in 20 countries, it's great to produce more product, but the reason why people go to the field is to make money for their families and to pay for school fees and pay for clothes and food and the kinds of things that we want to.
Yeah. But I think this problem also highlights the inefficiency of some of what the foundations and nonprofits are doing, because if a foundation is focusing on helping farmers improve yield while they can't even get their current yield to market in time, like there's a misalignment there.
Right. So Andrew, imagine this. Okay. Yes. So tomorrow you find a way that you could make 30% more for doing the same amount of work. You'd take the check, right?
Yes.
That $150 billion or $200 billion, depending on what day of the year is, and that's current dollars every year. That's not one time. And it's only going to rise as the number of people are out there, right?
Right.
That the $150, $200 billion, think of it like an uncashed check sitting by the side of the road. Okay. Mm. So part of our goal is to make sure that every bag of crops gets picked up when it should get picked up, gets put into the hands of people, and that the farmers get a reasonable shake of that. Now that's going to happen when it's more efficient to pick it up, when it's cheaper to pick it up because you're batching the transport, right? And when you get pushed into the global supply chain as quickly as possible. And we're very excited because all of the people that we've talked to say that we're in the right historical moment. The coverage is getting there in terms of data and cell phone coverage. People's knowledge of apps and how they work is getting there. People's literacy even frankly, the changes in the demography. Uganda, average age of a farmer is 58. Colombia, the average age of a farmer is 58. Same in the United States.
Wow.
We know that there's going to be a wholesale changeover in who owns the land, who runs the land, who farms the land, right? And if for a generation, farmers around the world have been saying to their kids, go to the city, don't do this. This is a bad business. We know from a macro public policy level, we know that we need to attract those people back to farming. And the only way that that's going to happen is if they can make money doing it. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense.
Right. That makes sense. Well, can you tell us like a story? I know you mentioned
before.
Great stories, I'll bet you do. You mentioned before some of the work you're doing in Colombia with avocado farmers. And
so we have we were working in two different parts of Colombia. We've done some field testing and some farmer interviews and getting all of the advice that one would need to get. And I remember the very first time we were working with the avocado farmers in La Unión and Pereira up in the Valle of Cauca and outside of it in Colombia, the highlands. And we're sitting and talking with the avocado farmers. The government of Colombia has invested almost $200 million to make avocados a thing, right? Haas avocados a thing. And we went and got the shirt. I got made an honorary member of ASOHAS, the Avocado Association. We did a big presentation for them and they were like, we're on board, we're ready to go. And I said, so tell me about this. Tell me about what it means to get into the supply chain for you guys, right? Tell me about your pain, right? The guy says to me, it's fascinating. He said to me, this avocado that I have in my hand is worth 3.5 euros in Brussels if I can get it into the supply chain at the right time. 2 days later, and it's worth 25% less. 1 week later, and you've obviously seen what it's like. An old avocado is not a happy thing, right?
Yes.
1 week later, it's pig food. It has almost no economic value, and I've lost the prospects for my family, right? So they're very much on board, and we met with people in different aspects of the supply chain, and everybody basically said the same thing, which is we need more visibility, we need to get things sooner, we need to make better transactions, we need to get people into the banking system. So that was it was pretty incredible to be sitting there up in the mountains with the guys actually picking the avocados and to have the head of the association explain to me really how much was at stake. I mean, the difference is just ginormous.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so give us an idea. I mean, how like the average, what's the average amount of acreage that some of these smallholder farmers actually
I can tell you, I mean, it ranges from, an acre or two all the way up to a pretty big, amount of territory. One of the things that we have tried very hard to do is to design the Agromovil platform in a way that it can be available to people as they are right now. So if you're a small farmer, you could get on the platform and you can use it. If you're a transporter currently, you can get on the platform. If you're one of the intermediaries and you're just going and picking stuff up and reselling it, you could still use the platform. Our goal is not, I want to distinguish ourselves from kind of like an Uber approach. Our goal isn't to put the existing system out of business, it's to make everybody more efficient. Obviously, over the course of time, a closer connection between buyer and seller is a good thing for both, right?
Yes.
But in the interim, in the interim, we know that intermediaries could use this, and people there are going to be some larger farmers who. We've got in Colombia, one of the places we're going to be piloting is with the Rubber Producers Union, right? The Rubber Producers Union already has a pretty good handle onto how to get their things into the international market. They need to get them from where the farm is, get them rolled up into batches, get them to the place where they can get processed and go out, right? And so it's there are you could be talking about a very small farm with an acre or two. You could be talking about a much larger farm that's using this as a way to either bundle more crops and fill up a load, or as a way to take the crops that they have and get them more efficiently to the buyers that they need them.
Right.
There is so much efficiency loss in these different ecosystems. The goal, though, is to make a platform that is so simple that people can use it. One of the things we've noticed, and I've spent now, I don't know, I started working in Africa in the 80s, and one of the things I've noticed is that a smart technologist is humble in working with emerging markets.
Yes.
Africa uses technology oftentimes in ways that are much much cleverer than we in the Silicon Valley world have ever thought of, right? So we're trying to keep it simple and work with partners to add in functionality as makes sense and let people use it how it makes sense to them.
Yeah. But so give us an anchor of what does this process actually look like in a super efficient market? Like farmers in the US or Europe, which I'm assuming we have a much more efficient process and supply chain than they have over there. Like what's so different about here that makes it more efficient? Is it just the infrastructure and the roads that's
some of it is roads, but we were just on the phone last week with a guy who is launching a kind of a startup who wants to license our technology, dealing with people in Sacramento. I mean, there is still tremendous inefficiency. There's still a lot of informal pickup, a lot of high-end specialty producers still. I mean, you've seen it when they come into the farm, come from the farm into the farmer's market, right? That's time that they're not producing. That's time that they're not hugely efficient sellers. They lose all of the product that comes into market, doesn't get sold, right? We were talking a couple of years back with guys in spoke at a conference for the World Bank. There are specialty meat and cheese producers in places like Ireland with those long and windy roads that could benefit tremendously if each of them has a truck, right? And each of those trucks has to come and make a pickup on those long and windy roads. That's in its own inefficiency. The basics of the market are the same whether you're talking about a richer country or a poorer country. It's the visibility for the farmer of being able to get their crops visible, right? And for the visibility of the purchaser that wants to purchase them. Now, we know that there are lots of marketplaces where people can put stuff up and people can buy. It's been going on for 15, 20 years, right? The difference is that I think we're connected to the transaction in a way they're not, and facilitate that transaction in a way that frankly will make people more money in the end for the farmer, for the transporter, and for the end user is the goal.
Right. So talk to us about, what does the process look like for you as a startup that's actually focused on these emerging frontier market that probably isn't really top of mind for a lot of VCs in Silicon Valley right now that are just investing in scooters, So it's always interesting to hear founders in these markets, like where are they spending their time in fundraising? Like, because there's a whole world of grants. There's a whole world of impact investors. There's a whole world of venture capitalists. And I've noticed that a lot of venture capitalists that invest in Africa, all because they invest in Africa, now they call themselves impact investment funds, right. But what does that process look for you? And, what's it like trying to manage like a cap table that's all these different, interests and priorities, and they have their own agendas, I'm assuming, when they're investing.
No, I think it's so hard as a founder to know. We have an amazing team, but it's so hard as a founder to know how to spend your time on this, right? I went to a conference a few years back. I'm trying to remember the one where opportunity collaboration was. I think it was one, and I was sitting talking with one of these impact investors, and the guy pulled me aside and basically said, Andrew, impact investing is like high school sex. Everybody's talking about it. No one's actually doing any, right? Yeah. And I thought, there's a lot of discussion, and there are a lot of people who I think want to do good things with their investing. I am a big believer that impact investing is just investing, and that we should all be thinking in terms of the impact that we are having. and that we should all be thinking long-term because we're hopefully going to be around for the long term, right? And more scooter companies I don't necessarily think we need. This is something that's front and center to all of our survival, and frankly, front and center to, like, you know, the standard of living that we all want to live, right? And so we manage this. You know, we've gotten great support from the Toyota Mobility Foundation. We've gotten some great support from Carnegie Mellon. We're beginning work with Ernst & Young to the Ripples program. We've got a lot of different people, and you're right, they all have slightly different perspectives. We are trying to say to everybody the same thing, which is, you know, this is not a nonprofit. Don't put your nonprofit hat on. This is a for-profit business that will have a very big positive outcome for the communities that we work in. But starting with and we went back to the beginning part of our conversation about Africa and viewing, you know, farmers in Africa as consumers, not just as people who are recipients of aid. I think the same thing is very much the case. The farmers and the transporters and the placeros, the people who sell in the plaza, they are valuable customers, right? They need to make money. We will make money when they make money, and I think that we organize ourselves very much in that way. I will say that it's tough. You know, there are a lot of windows that are open for potential support, but they're very slow. They take a really long time. You know, you could lose your entire life in the process of making applications for these different things, some of which will work and some of which won't. And the numbers are very, very small in a lot of cases. So you really have to prioritize. We've prioritized trying to make the technology really super cool, and we're working with we're working with a Global South developer team based in Bogota. We're working with students in Colombia and in other countries. I mean, it's very much it's very much, you know, you really have to try to be as efficient as you possibly can and focus on the content as much as possible. And we are hoping through things like this, people will see us and understand what we're trying to do. It is interesting though, when you go to a straight up VC. I used to be a banker. When you go to a straight up VC, they're very much like bankers. If you can show me that it already works, I'll invest more money in it.
Right.
Yeah, that's lovely. But if I can do that, I just go to the bank, right?
Yes.
So yeah, I think it's a place where the market needs to mature, and I think it's probably most difficult in places like Africa, where, you know, already people come with pre-baked notions of what's going on.
And what cities do you find yourself spending the most time in when you're fundraising? So one of the interesting things actually about this show, because, you know, we need to have our guests here in DC. A lot of the founders that I know that I'm emailing Africa, like, hey, we have this new studio in DC. You should come by. They're saying, well, you know, would love to. I spend most of my time in New York, actually, and I'm not in DC that much, which is interesting because it kind of shows, like, you know, maybe where the partners sit, where the capital is flowing from. It's like you as an entrepreneur that's operating in these markets, like what geographies or what cities are you kind of focusing your fundraising time in?
Yeah, so it's a good question. This is something that I think is a hard question. Okay, there are not a lot of investors in most parts of the global south. So where are we looking? Well, we've spent.
And when you say global south, is it Latin America, Africa?
Latin America, Africa primarily. But I mean, it's not that it doesn't exist, but there just aren't a lot. And so, you know, so that's a bit of a challenge, because when you're going to a VC or when you're going to another funding source, one of the things that they will ask you is what I used to ask as a banker, which is, okay, show me that local people are interested in this, right? And so we've established a lot of local contacts and local teaming and local partnerships. We've got partnerships with one of the largest credit unions in Colombia, and we've done work with big corporates and things like that to try and show that, in fact, you know, had great conversations with Walmart and all these people, to give people a sense of comfort about it. You know, we spent some time in Silicon Valley, and that seems to be going okay. It's a bit of a slow roll. New York a little bit less so, mostly because New York doesn't seem to be super excited about emerging markets from what I can see, and because there's a lot of quicker, easier ways to make money in a increasingly squishy global environment. I also think that agriculture is a little bit different than the scooter business, in that you need to think a little bit longer term, right? That said, we've got a business model that puts us cash flow positive in 18 months. So we're pretty jazzed about it. It's one of those things that's always a challenge. How much time do you spend trying to build the brand versus how much time do you spend building the product? And we have defaulted perhaps a little bit more to building the product because we thought that's the real value. And so far, so good. I can't complain. We're coming out of the lab with an awful lot of juice and a little bit of a tailwind, and really excited about where we're going later this year.
Right. Well, I mean, do you really think that the brand is very important with what you're doing? Like, from the farmer's perspective, they probably it's just more, get me more money, and we'll definitely use it.
Sure.
But like, who do you feel like the brand like?
Oh no, I think the brand is mostly important in terms of building buzz for investors, frankly. Right. It seems to be increasingly possible to get, on CNBC and Forbes and this kind of stuff with a good shiny thing. I don't think it necessarily lasts very long, but it's not a bad credential to have.
Right.
We've gone through Peace Tech Lab and we had a great experience here. We, won World Bank startup contests, but the rubber meets the road like it did in our last meeting on the ground with the farmers and transporters in outside of Lebrija in Santander, the eastern part of Colombia. When you see one farmer showing another farmer how to use the app, right, and scheduling a pickup and having that come all the way through the process, you're onto the right thing. And so yeah, I mean, I think the branding is important in terms of raising more money, which we are definitely in. We're finally at the place where I really, really, could use it now.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like anything as a founder, it's that balance of trying to get both of those things done with with the startup resources that you can imagine.
Yeah. But I mean, it's probably amazing for you to see that the farmers doing that. And I think these markets, and I was talking with Rebecca Nongchong in our last episode about this, where these markets they're not necessarily used to win-win propositions. They're used to a deal where it's like someone's getting screwed over and it's certainly not going to be me. I'm going to make sure I position myself so that's not the case. But with a product that you're introducing to the market, like you are, you're introducing a win-win to the market that when you actually have a good solution like that, people are actually going to share it. And there's going to be a virality to it.
And it's going to bring people in who would otherwise not be in. I mean, so there are people on the continent in Africa and in Latin America that are doing things that are more localized, right? Where they're, groups like Twiga that own big pieces of a supply chain, and God bless. I hope that they're successful. Part of what we're trying to do is to set ourselves up a little bit more like an Airbnb platform. It's a thinner platform that people can get onto more easily, because we know that there are parts of the country which will in many countries that are coming out of conflict or whatever, that may not be able to be fully integrated in the short term, right? But can a farmer who really wants to get into the supply chain do it? Sure. Right? There are going to be some small countries. I'm thinking of places in Guinea where it's going to be like some of the small. Guinea jumped into my mind because someone was mentioning it the other day. But some of the smaller countries are really hard to raise capital for. Right? You say, I got a great startup and I want to push it into this market. People are going to be like, okay, great, but we've got X number of millions of people. That doesn't become a front of mind. And so we wanted to try to come up with a simple enough platform that people could say, I will take it up, and I'm gonna use it in my country, and it doesn't require huge infrastructure in an area where people may not have huge infrastructure.
Yeah, but the infrastructure piece is certainly a catch-22 in a market like like you said, Malawi, or use Timor-Leste as an example. Sure. Like, what are you going to raise all this debt to build all this ICT infrastructure for who?
Exactly. So that's why having a simple interface that people can download and use themselves, where the only integration that needs to happen on a national platform, a national basis, would be an integration with the payment system.
Yes.
It's a simpler place to go. It also allows, frankly, for a much more security if you're trying to get out to parts of the country that might be a little bit less secure. And, I think that this is the way to go. We need to, if we're going to make full use of all the good work that's been done to try to increase yield and increase the capacity of farmers and all of that kind of stuff, and we need to complete the equation. And completing the equation means getting those crops to market and getting people paid more.
Yes. Amazing. Well, Andrew Mack, CEO of Agromovil, Thank you so much for joining us. Before we sign off, what do you look for in partners? Like if we have potential partners tuning in right now, like what do you look for in an ideal partnership?
In an ideal partnership, we're looking for someone who has, obviously a great entrepreneurial spirit and a great entrepreneurial mind. We're looking to try to build our networks. You asked before about how we were going to get this out into a large number of people's hands.
Yes.
We're looking for networks of farmers. We're looking for cell phone companies and other aggregators that we can work off of, right? People who have an interest in seeing their members or their customers succeed, where this would be a good help, right? So we've partnered with, we're partnering with universities that have large groups of technical expertise. We're partnering with financial organizations. We're partnering with growers organizations, buyers organizations, and those kinds of people would be fabulous to work with.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah,
well, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm excited to bring it to Africa. We've worked with 34 countries in Africa over the course of my career, so I'm not a stranger, and looking forward to seeing you on the continent.
Awesome. Well, as you grow, as you progress, I'm sure we'll have you on the show at some point again over the next
Thanks. Looking forward to it.
few months. Yeah.